before the board for approval for request for early release. And I'll let Mr. Bergen explain a little bit about what the early release program is and how it works.
Yeah, they just have students who are eligible to work second semester if they're a senior and they're on course to graduate, then they can go to work. And so if they decide to do that, I get a letter from the employer, and their parents sign it, and they sign it, and then they can go to work. And if someone goes to work anytime after 4th hour, 5th hour, 6th hour, and like I say, as long as they're on course to graduate and everything's fine, and the student in good standing, then they can go to work. So this year we only have 2 students that are interested. I don't know, Dr. Kimberly, if you just...
Does that count the line?
Yeah, I had that.
Okay, you did.
I had that. I don't know if you want just to give them names or just 2 of them, or does it make any difference?
Yeah, if you just give me the names, that'd be fine.
I mean, I can pass them out if you want. Just do it that way. Those are the 2 students that applied.
And the students have met all the requirements.
Right. They're on track to graduate. And their employer, I've got a letter that stated from their employer. Parents signed it and they've signed it.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve the release program as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the early release request as presented for the 2 students. Any discussion? All in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Building use requests.
Mr. President and Board, we have 2 building use requests that we'll present tonight. One of these requests is from prom parents. They have an annual prom parents basketball tournament. Dates are January 17th and 18th. The second request we have is from Lions Club for the Lions Club Midwinter Classic, January 20th, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. And administration recommend that the board approve waiving facility use fees and custodial fees for both of these events.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the building use request with waiver of building and custodial fees.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the building use request with the waiver of building fees and custodial fees for the after prom parents in January 17-18 and for the Lions Club Midwinter Basketball Classic in the 20, 22, 23, and 24 of January. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. South Central Community Foundation update.
Yes, it's my privilege to be able to introduce Denise Unruh. She's from the South Central Community Foundation. And Denise, I'm going to let you introduce who we have with
I will
you.
be happy to. Is it appropriate to stand at the head of the
Stand
table?
down there if you wish.
Okay.
Before you get started, Denise is our contact person with the South Central Foundation. Our contact there is because the St. John Community Education Foundation funds, as well as some of our library funds are invested down there. So even though it's probably one of the more dismal times from an economic standpoint to be looking at investments and stuff, it's something that we feel like it's something we need to do on about an annual basis. We haven't done this for a while, so.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here and share our information with you. As you said, I'm Denise Unruh, the Executive Director of the Community Foundation, and with me is Mark Keeney, who's Chairman of our Investment Committee. And I'll share kind of the history of the fund, and then Mark will go into more of the performance and the investment side of it. The fund was established in May of '04, and this came through your Education Foundation. And it was initially funded $872,000, and then we had a subsequent donation of $3,429.07. And then just this year, we've had a $2,740 donation addition to the fund, which gives your, what we would call principal or corpus, at $878,169.48. Over the course of the years that we've held this fund, the only distribution that's been requested has been $30,000 that was sent back to you all. Now, the way the fund agreement is set up, you have the right to request whatever you need, whenever you need it by written request. Now, so basically we've got two types of funds. One fund is where we protect the principal and nobody gets to spend the principal, you just spend the earnings off of it. But your fund is where you can invade the principal if you need to. And the sentiment when this fund was established was for the long-term investment, and that it wouldn't be used unless there was a need, or the hope was that it would grow over time, and we were doing really well until the last few months, of course, which all of us have understand what's happening in the economic situation. Now, I have with me the December 30th report that we send to the school. Now, my understanding, this is the Education Foundation, and are one of you on that board, on that Education Foundation board? Oh, you are, okay. So if you want to pass those around. And by September, there was a loss in the portfolio, and you'll see that reflected in the loss in your fund. And then are there questions about how it was established? And when the funds came to us, they had been invested in certificates of deposit for many, 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 many years. And at the time they were invested in CDs, the interest rate was really low and wasn't keeping up with inflation. And there was some, the foundation, of course, your foundation, our foundation, does have the right to be able to invest public monies in, or charitable dollars in the stock market. And we have an investment policy that the investment committee follows, and there is exposure to the market and fixed and equities. We have a ratio of 70 to 30 target, 70% equities, 30% fixed, and Mark will kind of explain a little bit more about that. So the funds do have some market risk, which is where we see over time is a way to solve for inflation. But you do have to be able to ride out the highs and the lows of the market. So I will turn that over to Mark now to talk about the investment side.
Take one of those, pass that down. You've got a 2-page document there. One talks about asset mix on the front page, and the second page is performance. You'll have to excuse my voice. I was at the KU Missouri game over the weekend and spent a little bit of time yelling, so anyway, what we have on the front, as Denise had talked about, we have what we call our asset mix, and this is the same report that goes to our board and the results at the end of September. On the left-hand side, you can see that we have an actual mix of 29% of bonds, 15% of cash. Now that cash will include investments in CDs as well as money market accounts. We just lump that all in one cash category. We have U.S. stock of 44% and foreign stock of 12%. That gives us a current mix of 56% of equity stocks and 44% of fixed investments, which isn't a bad position to be now. I just wish we were there 18 months ago in that position. But that's where we're at. What we look at is this asset mix. is adjusting between the 70-30% mix, typically with a 10% fluctuation on either side of that. And, the goal of that is to achieve some long-term performance growth, and it just gives us some flexibility to move within those categories as conditions change. If you flip the page over, you can see our discussion of the investment portfolio performance. Probably the meat and potatoes is really at the middle of the page there. We have a calculation of our fund performance against an index, and the index is weighted between the S&P 500 and what is called the Lehman Brothers Aggregate Bond Index. And so you can see that the weighted performance of our index was down 12.76, and our portfolio was down 12.66. Keep in mind that's as of the end of September. It does not include October and November, which, as we all are probably well aware, was a couple of poor performing months. Following that is some investments that we've made recently to kind of shore up our equity position. The good thing about our portfolio is we do have a fairly sizable amount in bonds and CD investments right now, which are going to provide some return to the portfolio. But really what we're looking for is long-term performance. We feel the mix of that 70-30 range is very comparable to our peer groups out there, university foundations and those type organizations. So it's not very good news, and I share a little story with you about 8 years ago we started a 401k retirement plan, and I could always tell what kind of meeting we were going to have because our investment rep would bring 3 kinds of folders. It was either green, yellow, or red, kind of like a stoplight. And so if I was going to put that in a folder, it'd be in a red folder. And things are not good right now, but it's a time really where we're trying to be very smart and invest in things that we think are going to recover quickly, consumer staple type stocks and those things. We have invested a little bit of money in some financials recently because we felt that sector was beat down pretty hard, and we think there's going to be some long-term value there.
How often does your investment committee meet generally?
Generally, we try and meet at least quarterly. Depending on the flow of funds in and out, we will meet more often than that as necessary.
These numbers are updated quarterly?
Yeah.
Or is that?
Those numbers that you have are updated quarterly.
Anything else for us?
Well, more than happy to meet with the foundation board also to talk through this. And one of the reasons that we really appreciate the relationship with y'all is that we are local, and if there are people in your area that are doing estate planning and looking at doing some charitable gifting in their estate plan, we're more than happy to help you talk to those individuals and how they can benefit the school through scholarships or monies to the library. That was one of the selling points of going with a local organization, that we're not just investment management firm. We're not like the big boys on Wall Street. We want to work locally with community issues and donors, our Association of Community Foundations sponsored a study last year on the transfer of wealth from the baby boomer generation to the next generation, my generation to my kids. And what that study said in Kansas is the rural areas are going to take a big hit if we don't do something to retain some of those assets, because our population is aging out here, and consequently we're going to die off sooner rather than later, which means those assets will be transferring to our heirs. Well, where do our heirs live? Where do your kids live? Where do my kids live? They're not in Pratt County or Cairo County or Stafford County. They're in Lawrence and Tulsa and Oklahoma City. So we're not just losing our population when our kids leave, we are losing assets as the generational wealth passes on to the heirs. Now, we don't want our heirs to suffer or take anything away from our heirs, but it's our belief that it's reasonable to ask people to leave something at home. If typically they say an estate is in the $200,000 range, that's an average estate. When you look at my family with an average estate, I have 4 kids, and you transfer that $200,000 to 4 kids, they get a nice little chunk of change to remember their mother by. But if I would just take 10% of that, that's a $20,000 endowment. Put that in a vehicle, an endowment vehicle, which is permanent. You don't spend the principal, you invest the principal, and you use the earnings off of that. And it's like living off of your retirement fund, to just use the earnings off of that and keep the principal invested. And if we would take just 10% of that average estate, invested in an endowment fund, that spins off $1,000 every year from now until forever to whatever charity I want to support, my church, the library, the hospital, the college. And that goes on forever. Well, what does that cost my heirs? That's a $5,000 cost to each of my kids to divert 10% of their inheritance to an endowment fund. Now, which is the better investment? An endowment fund that shows my kids the responsibility and the opportunity to give back to the community where they were raised, and to support the church where they went to Sunday school, to support the library where they went to story time, to support the school where they attended, or the $5,000 big screen TV they would buy. I think it's a good investment in my kids, in the heirs of my inheritance. And it also, as we look at our local charities, particularly churches, when we see that the congregations are aging, what happens when there's a congregation that loses a parishioner? That parishioner is given their $1,000 every year, just like clockwork. By the end of the year, they've contributed $1,000 to that church. Well, they pass away. That's a hit. But what happens when 5 of those parishioners die in the same year? That church is just taking a $5,000 hit to their budget. So do you cut the pastor's salary, or do you lay off the church secretary, or cut back on your programs? But if those 5 parishioners would divert some of their estate into an endowment fund, it will continue to spin off that $1,000, and the church will continue on with the same kind of budget that they had before their parishioners had passed away, which I think is a beautiful way to give back to the community on an ongoing basis, to provide those permanent funding streams. Plus, if you really want to haunt somebody, they won't ever forget you, because that $1,000 is going to come back every year. So if you really want to make an impact, that's the message that we're about. And it's people like you that will open the doors to those in your community where I can come and talk about those things. And that's one of the reasons we really like to partner locally with boards. If you have people in your community that have been supportive of the library and supportive of the school, let's sit around the table and talk about estate planning and talk about how they can leave a legacy. It'll be a permanent funding stream for your organizations. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank both of you for coming tonight.
Make that available quarterly to us.
Yep.
Okay. Item 6, we need to appoint KASB convention
recommend appointing Bruce, he'll be attending. I think Mitch is going to try, if schedules work out. The way the motion works is we appoint Bruce as our delegate representative, the remaining of the board as alternates in case something should happen. We can go to do that, but Bruce is who we have sent mainly for to be there and vote the delegate representative assembly on Saturday morning. So,
Mr. President, I move that the board appoint Bruce Stanford with the rest of us as alternates as the USD 250 delegate assembly representative and the that convention.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint myself as the USD 350 delegate assembly representative and the remaining members as alternates at the KSP annual convention. Do I have any discussion? Anyone have a vote? All in favor, right hand. All opposed, same sign, motion carried. Insurance proposal.
Mr. President and Board, last month presented you with information about a return of district funds that the district received from our previous health insurance program that we were involved with the co-op out at Clearwater.
Sublette.
Sublette, I'm sorry, thank you. And this has been, I think, 9-10 years ago, and that program was closed out. Funds that were there as guarantees for whatever costs might be incurred closing things out were there. Those district funds were then returned to us. Administration would like to propose that we distribute those funds back to our certified and classified employees. These are not insurance premiums, but they are monies that were from that insurance program. They're not affiliated with any one individual or person, but we felt like that would be a good use of the funds to reward those staff for their hard work. What we would propose is that it would be an equal distribution based upon percentage of their job. So if they are a full-time employee, they would get a full-time rate percentage of that. If they're a half-time employee, it would be half of that amount. To give you an idea of what we're talking about, the total amount was just less than $100 under $26,000. So dividing it up the way in which I've described, for a full-time employee, after all the taxes and things like that, it would be approximately, and don't hold me to this because it depends a little bit upon how many deductions people have for taxes and things like that, but approximately $330 for a full-time employee. For a half-time employee, it would range down to about $176. Those are approximate amounts.
Now, this is employees that currently work here or worked here 9 years ago
These
when
are
this
our-
money was.
These are our current employees. We don't have any way.
Do they include administrators?
The building administrator should does, yes.
We have 3 administrators.
I'm not including myself in that, so I'm already well paid, so. But it would be so difficult to try to track backwards on who was here then, determining percentages and things like that. And as I said, they're not, there were times in the past when there actually were refunds of premiums. These are not refunds of premiums. These are refunds of the guaranteed amount that was district funds left there to close out the accounts. So,
Is it taxable?
yes, for those employees that will be.
Even people that were here 9 years ago, would it be taxable if they paid into it?
Well, it's not insurance premiums that they had in there. I guess maybe I'm not understanding your question.
I'm just hypothetically thinking that
Uh-huh.
portions of that fund to establish that money people paid into it, to establish that fund, and if they're refunding part of that money that they put into that pool,
Yeah.
would the people that were here 9 years ago, would they have to pay taxes?
Well, my understanding of the funds is, first, and the way I've been describing to people, if we were to start, if we weren't a part of the SDAC insurance group right now, and were to start tomorrow, in order to get into that group, the district would have to pay a 10% surcharge on each policy to get our people in. And so, that's how I understand these funds are returned. These are like that,
So it's a district, not a employee.
right.
Okay.
It's not affiliated with individual employees or premiums. And even if it were, I don't know how we would tie it back 10 years to even know how to start. Because you would have some people that might have been with the district in that time 3 years, some might have been with the district 5 years, however far back it went, so. So that's our recommendation.
You have sought the legal advice and the accounting advice and all of that,
Of our
right?
accountant, yes. There was a question I know among some about including our special ed staff. That is problematic in a couple ways. One, they're not our employees, they're employees of the special ed co-op. And we would have to contract with them, we would have to come up with jobs for them in order to be whatever we were contract with them for. And in looking at it, if the special ed co-op, who also has insurance that they provide for their employees, if they were to get a refund on that end, I don't think there'd be an expectation that they would provide money to all of our employees when it was distributed. I did meet with the majority of I met with all of our full-time special ed teachers, and was able to meet with some of our special ed pairs and advise them of what was happening. And I said, when I create hard feelings with what's being proposed, I said, but you need to understand what's going to happen. And they said they understood. They said, with employees down there, they said the same thing. If it happened on their end, they wouldn't expect it to come the other way. So.
Have you presented this to our staff who will be receiving this yet?
No, not formally. I don't want to create anticipations that
That's, yeah.
from what happens.
So if someone doesn't want it, we'll just keep it.
Or they can designate Mr. Bergen.
Do it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll be a problem.
Okay.
Or with been reading in the paper about the state shortfall that they're gonna have to make up, and which may mean that we don't get the increase in state funding here. And with all that, I'd rather see us put it in the bank. That it was taxpayer money that went in, and we could put that in the bank, pay for part of the bus that we've got, or put it in a capital outlay fund myself to use. Because we're gonna have to raise that money. We're gonna have less to spend.
Mr. President, I don't know, at this point, we've not been told that we're going to have to make any cuts for this year. So, felt like it was a good, we have staff that work very hard, and just felt like we have the opportunity to show some additional appreciation.